What it do, what it do? It's your boy Andre Spruell, and you are tuning in to the Middle of the Fence podcast. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day, whether you're listening, watching, or both. As I like to say, time is the most valuable thing on this earth because we can spend it but can't make it back. So as always, thank you for your time. And if you haven't checked out the previous episodes, please be sure to do so on your favorite podcast streaming platforms, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. And if you're more of a visual person, please be sure to check us out on YouTube. And regardless of what platform that you're on, please be sure to follow, subscribe, and comment. And for everyone that has messaged me so far showing love and support for the show, I greatly value it. And if you do share it on your Instagram stories, please be sure to tag me and or the podcast in it so I can make sure to reply and show the same love back. And today's episode is going to be focused on life on the Affluent Acres side. And the topics for today are the environment and culture shock, benefits and access, the internal tug of war, and lessons and reflections from the Affluent Acres side. And before I could understand the lessons or benefits of being in those affluent spaces, I had to adjust to the environment itself. So let me delve further into that. So the physical view of the Affluent Acres environment. So growing up on the tough terrain side, I thought I had a pretty nice house. It was a duplex home, and in total was about 10 bedrooms and 3 baths, super long driveway that had a 2-car garage in the back, and then a upper level that could be livable in, and massive backyard that I'd say was about 30 yards, if you can picture a football field. So, considering the tough terrain side of things, that's pretty nice. And then I got to the Affluent Acre side, and my perspective completely changed. Just being in those spaces and seeing million-dollar homes for the first time, and being in a neighborhood where there's not graffiti on any of the walls or anything like that. And my biggest takeaway when I was a kid, just seeing the physical world of the Affluent Acre side was, wow, the streets are actually nicely paved, because on the tough terrain side, a lot of the roads got bumpy, to say the least. Pun fully intended there. And also, too, just going into those types of homes on the Affluent Acres side for the very first time, started out in middle school, being in my first $1 million home, and then that progressed throughout high school and beyond, because in high school, obviously, from friends that I had in high school parties and graduation parties and things of that nature. So first time going into those homes, it was like, yo, this shit is fucking nice, but then you get acclimated to it, and it's not as big of a wow factor or a surprise, but just more so like, hey, this is how life is on the Affluent Acres side. Not my first $1 million home, not my last one that I'll enter. So, just what came with the territory with that. And aside from the physical environment of things, the emotional and mental adjustment that I needed to undergo was definitely a big factor. And the biggest factor with that hurdle was questioning my ethnicity, because like I mentioned in previous episodes, I'm Black and Argentinian, and I felt like being Argentinian was a lot more accepted than it was to be Black or Black and Argentinian. And I remember what really highlighted this is this personal story that I'm about to share with you guys, where I was in 3rd grade going to private school on the Affluent Acres side. And the hairstyle that was in for the white boys at the time was the spiked front part of the hair, not spiked all around, but just the front part of your hair that was spiked. So a good amount of the kids in my grade had that hairstyle, and I got teased about not being able to spike my hair, and it wasn't done in like a malicious way or anything like that. But I do remember that afterwards I asked the teacher to go to the bathroom, and I was just looking at third grade Dre, so I was probably like 9, 10 if my math is right. Math wasn't my best subject. And I just remember looking in the mirror, putting water in my hair, trying to spike it. But for those that are not watching, my hair texture is definitely derives more from my black side of the family. So I have 4C texture hair. So it being spiked is never going to happen. Wasn't going to happen then, isn't going to happen now, and won't happen in the future. But another aspect of the emotional and mental hurdle was the fact of being hyper aware of the small things that expose the financial differences, right? So, for example, the clothes that I wore, the vacations that my family went on, the type of school supplies that I had, because obviously how kids dress on the Affluent Acres side is much different than how kids on the tough terrain side dress. And when I was growing up, I had to be mindful of, hey, my family shopped at Foreman Mills for us, got South Pole, G Unit clothing, Sean John, Fat Farm, and things like that. So when I would wear those types of clothes growing up in the Affluent Acres types of spaces, obviously that gave away the fact that I didn't grow up in the Affluent Acres the way that my classmates did. And again, it was just all, part of the story that came along with it. So, it is what it is, right? And another aspect of that was the micro moments of alienation. So what I mean by that is the things that are common on the Affluent Acres side that aren't common on the tough terrain side. Like, for example, you've never been skiing? Why can't your parents just pay for it? Wait, you're from what town? So again, those are just some of the stuff that to someone on the Affluent Acres side probably was very minor because it didn't affect their lives in any kind of way. But for someone like myself that grew up on the tough terrain side, those types of micro moments of alienation actually contributed to being hyper aware of the things that made me realize that I was different on the Affluent Acres side. And anytime I interacted with people on the Affluent Acres side, I was reminded in little ways that I was different. And once I got past the initial adjustment, I started to realize there were certain privileges I was gaining access to, privileges that could change the course of someone's life. So let's talk about that part of things. So the benefits and access is the second topic that's being discussed. And when it comes to the benefits and access, a lot of people just focus on the financial side of the benefits and access, but I want to focus on something different. And what I want to focus on is the fact that when it comes to benefits and access, the kids that grew up on the Affluent Acres side are able to see what different levels of success looks and feels like compared to those on the tough terrain side. So in a 2015 study from the Journal of Adolescent Research, they found that kids from underrepresented backgrounds often default to athletes and entertainers as role models due to lack of exposure to professional and entrepreneurial success in their community. And personally, I feel, again, this is probably the biggest thing to highlight for the benefits and access on the Affluent Acres side. And because when you grow up on the tough terrain side, when it comes to people that you look up to growing up as a kid, more often than not, it's an athlete or an entertainer. And when you have large groups of tough terrain communities trying to fit into that funnel that you already have basically no chance of being highly successful in, and it's the same avenues that everyone else is trying to take, it distorts your view because you don't know better if you grew up on the tough terrain side. But on the Affluent Acres side, I feel like people that grew up on the Affluent Acres side don't look up to and idolize celebrities as much as those on the tough terrain side, because on the Affluent Acres side, not only do you see athletes and entertainers, but you're able to see doctors and lawyers and entrepreneurs that are real estate agents and do very well for themselves, or that are entrepreneurs in having a cleaning business or owning multiple laundromats or something like that. And just from growing up on the Affluent Acre side, there's a million and one ways to make money, and you definitely see a lot more visual representation of people that are successful in multiple avenues. And again, that's something that I feel doesn't get talked about enough or highlighted enough, and it's no fault of people that grew up and live on the Affluent Acre side. And what can be done to bring that over to the tough terrain side, I wish I had the answer for that, but unfortunately I don't, guys. Even though I'd like to think I have the answers to most things, for that one I don't. And on the flip side of the benefits and access portion, there's kids that grew up on the Affluent Acre side that were also on scholarships, like how I was, which rocked my world, to be honest, because I just figured, if you grew up on the Affluent Acre side, then life is good. Even if you're not super wealthy, then your family is financially stable enough to send you to private school, go on your vacations, be able to go to college and things like that. And then to tie that in even further, there's also kids that grew up on the Affluent Acre side, but that grew up on the quote unquote poor part of the Affluent Acre side. So in a way, kids that were on scholarships on the Affluent Acre side or lived in the poorer parts of the Affluent Acre side, even though they technically lived on the Affluent Acre side and still had those pieces of benefits and access, in a way those kids were like tough terrain kids, just in that Affluent Acres environment. And speaking of kids on the Affluent Acres side on scholarships, this was highlighted to me when I was in high school, because in order for me to go to the private high school that I went to on the Affluent Acres side, I needed to get a scholarship, because paying for the full tuition costs just would have been nearly impossible, or I would have had to chosen a different school altogether. And there was a particular scholarship that's still active today called the Tri-County Scholarship, because I still get a bunch of emails about it all these years later. But anyway, Tri-County, just like it sounds like, it's 3 counties that you have to live in to qualify for the scholarship. And since I grew up in Orange, New Jersey, Essex County was not one of the counties that qualified for it, but Morris County was. So part of the sacrifice that I had to make was living with one of my uncles in Morris County for my freshman year of high school, just so I can have proof of address that I live in Morris County, qualify for the scholarship, and be able to go to the high school that I went to. And it's not like the uncle that I lived with on the Affluent Acres side, it's not like, he had a mansion and I was living like a king and we had maids and things like that. It wasn't like that. It was more so very modest home, and then he had a guest house towards the back, and I was in the guest house with my uncle. So, and at first it was like, it was something that I looked forward to, because it's like, okay, now I'm closer to my friends that I grew up with. And the schedule looked like Sunday night, get to my uncle's, stay there until Friday, and then go back home for the weekend. But what I was looking forward to and excited about ended up being one of the loneliest moments of my teenage years. Honestly, probably one of my lowest like moments of how I felt in years and throughout the years of my life. And it was definitely a struggle from the perspective of I'm literally doing this just to qualify for a scholarship so I can go to this school. And in the end, it was worth it because it contributed to being able to share my story and realize that there's other people that probably had to do similar things. I remember seeing a scene in that in the Friday Night Lights television show. For those that are fans of that, go Panthers. And also too, for the kids that were on the kids from the Affluent Acres side that were on that scholarship, it was either because their families were enduring financial hardships as well, or something more serious along the lines of their parents going through a divorce and then the kids being caught in the middle, so they had to qualify for the scholarship as a result too. But here's the thing. Just because you gain access doesn't mean you stop carrying your roots with you. Sometimes a foot in both worlds creates this tug of war inside of you, so let's get into that portion as well. So the next category, the internal tug of war. And the first thing for the identity shift with this is code switching. So before I get into my thoughts of code switching and how it's viewed in this present day and things of that nature, a 2020 Harvard Business Review study found that code switching depletes cognitive resources, increasing anxiety and reducing authentic self-expression, especially for Black and marginalized individuals in predominantly white or affluent spaces. First off, well, second, it's true. And to go further into that portion of it, the code switching, I feel like it's glamorized more than what it should be. And instead of code switching, you should be able to be yourself and who you are, regardless of what side of the fence that you're on. And obviously, in certain environments, you do have to carry yourself a certain way, right? Like if you're at a super fancy gala dinner, you have to carry yourself a certain way versus if you're going to a dive bar type of atmosphere with friends or something like that. That's the example that came to the top of my head. So it is what it is. But I feel like the code switching portion was definitely a big hurdle. And when I found this research point from the Harvard Business Review study, I really resonated with it a lot because I felt like growing up as a child and teenager and even into my early 20s, to be frank, it's who I was on the tough terrain side and how I carried myself there was different than how I had to carry myself on the Affluent Acres side. And because of having to show up as two different versions of myself, it's like those were being at odds and slowly starting to just like pull me apart, you know? And I feel like what helped me eventually move past that was the fact that you have to gain a strong sense of self-identity. And once you understand who you are as best you can, how you operate, what your values are, what your strengths and weaknesses are, you're able to move in the most authentic version of yourself. And once I reached that point, now I'm able to be in a tough terrain type of neighborhood or in an Affluent Acres type of neighborhood and still talk exactly how I do. And you know, the only thing is that I still speak eloquently regardless of what side of the fence that I'm on, and I'll put my slang in there from time to time. The big difference that I will say is that I do say nigga a lot more on the tough terrain side than I do on the Affluent Acres side, and rightfully so, because saying it amongst a community that is allowed to say it and are way more comfortable saying it versus a community that is literally unable to or feel very, very uncomfortable in doing so. That is the primary difference. But again, getting that self-identity helped move past that internal tug of war that was created from code switching on both sides of the fence. And sports was another way that helped not have that internal tug of war be so strong. And on the Affluent Acre side, again, most of the students do not look like me. Most of the families did not look like mine. But I was a pretty decent basketball player and pretty good athlete. So those are the things that allowed me to assimilate to life on the Affluent Acre side a lot more than, I feel like if I was just a regular student and didn't have any interest in athletics or anything like that, I'm sure I still would have been fine because, again, I learned how to pride myself on being my most authentic version. But the sports factor definitely helped me find my friends and just, again, get better acclimated to life on the Affluent Acre side, because as I was meeting more kids on the Affluent Acre side, as I progressed through middle school and high school, they knew me as an athlete, and that just helped make life a lot easier versus like constantly having to reintroduce myself, And another aspect of the internal tug of war that I feel like doesn't get talked about enough either is the fact that just knowing that you're being watched as a representative of the tough terrain side and what encompasses that. So what I mean by that is, for life on the Affluent Acre side, if you grew up on the Affluent Acre side, your family has been there for generations, it's all you know, you haven't really ventured outside of it, odds are pretty high you haven't interacted with anyone that grew up on the tough terrain side. And if I were to have a guess, if you grew up on the Affluent Acre side most of your life and have interacted with someone on the tough terrain side, it likely was through a workplace where, someone probably has a similar story to me, like having to fight tooth and nail just to sniff an opportunity to get a good corporate type of job on the Affluent Acre side. So part of it is not only trying my best to be myself and figure out where I fit in and things of that nature, but also being cognizant of the fact that, hey, I'm not just representing myself, I'm representing Orange and the kids that are from the tough terrain side. So that way it helps change those perceptions of the people on the Affluent Acre side when it comes to how they view people on the tough terrain side, and help change that for the better and make them realize, like, hey, whatever preconceived notions that you had for people on the tough terrain side and how they look, how they talk, how they dress, how they behave and things of that nature, it's you can't group everyone in that. Everyone is their own individual and unique and things of that nature, just like those on the Affluent Acre side. Everyone that's on the Affluent Acre side has their own stories and sets of challenges, just like those on the tough terrain side. And looking back, that tug of war wasn't just about survival, it was about learning. And as I've grown, I've realized there are lessons in living this kind of life. Lessons about privilege, pressure, and purpose, and things like that. So let me reflect on the 3 biggest lessons and reflections from life on the Affluent Acres side, but also tying in some aspects of the tough terrain side. So for the first lesson and reflection, privilege is access, not character. Access to better resources doesn't automatically make life easier emotionally or spiritually. It just gives you a different set of challenges. And I love everyone equally. I'm all about spreading love and kindness. And I just want to be frank that through my interactions with people on the tough terrain side, because they compare how they grew up versus what they see in TV shows and movies of those on the Affluent Acres side, they tend to think that life is easier on the Affluent Acres side. And again, you can't ignore the fact that people on the Affluent Acres side do have more access to opportunities and things of that nature. Again, that can't be ignored at all, but it doesn't mean that they don't go through their own sets of challenges as well. Just like the song and phrase that everyone says, more money, more problems, right? So, and just seeing that firsthand is, again, that's what contributed to realizing that, whether you grew up on the Affluent Acres side, whether you grew up on the tough terrain side, everyone goes through their own shit and goes through their own sets of, problems, whether it's personal demons that we're fighting or family problems, which everyone always has a family problem, and it's about, if it's about treating others with kindness and respect, it's a two-way street, so you can't just pick on the Affluent Acres people for judging people that don't look like them, that don't talk like them, that don't dress like them, or that don't behave like them. And on the flip side, you can't, if you have more of a tough terrain background, you can't be so quick to assume that life is just automatically easier and simpler and no problems on the Affluent Acres side. And I feel like that is a primary factor that can help bridge both sides of the fence, is realizing that, hey, regardless of the material aspects, if you just strip all of that away, at the end of the day, we are human beings. We all go through our sets of problems, and we can realize, oh, wow, I didn't realize that this person was going through a struggle or a battle that is very similar to mine or very similar to someone that I know, so that's why it's important to connect and share your stories, and that is the purpose of this platform. And the second lesson is survivor's guilt and identity struggles. So this one is for those that grow up on the tough terrain trying to make it. So being the one who made it out or the one who's different can create a silent weight that's hard to talk about, but it's part of the journey. And this is what encompasses why I created this podcast in the first place, and the rags to riches story, it's nothing new, and it's going to keep happening, right? But the sacrifices that have to be made along the way to quote unquote make it out the hood or whatever, it's a lot of pressure. And I felt like growing up, even into my later years into these days, it was something where it was just like, okay, I'm just going to embrace the toughness and resilience learned on the tough terrain side and carry it through my experiences on the Affluent Acres side. But as a result, it ended up leading to bottling in emotions and feelings and things of that nature that, it was a lot to carry, but it was easier. I felt at the time, it was just easier to push through and not open up about how difficult the journey was, because it's a lot easier. And from just protecting yourself, it's a lot easier to just put a smile on your face, act like everything is okay, and keep it pushing. And something like that doesn't just tie into my experience of growing up on the tough terrain side and Affluent Acres side simultaneously, but that's something that's relatable to subjects outside of this, and I feel like in this day and age, therapy is something that's a lot more popular and conducive, and we like to blame previous generations for how they operated about not opening up their feelings and things like that. Like my parents' generation, not the best at it. My grandparents' generation, opening up about their feelings, forget about it. That just doesn't happen, But Again, that was like the biggest thing with that, but I think it's a real cool thing how it can tie into subjects and factors outside of just my experience when it comes to the internal pressures and weight that you feel and not opening up about it. And the third lesson and main purpose of the podcast, which I can't say enough, bridging both sides is the mission. So in a 2016 Stanford study, they found that people who navigate between different social and cultural spaces develop higher social adaptability and emotional intelligence, which leads to long-term career and life advantages, but often after years of discomfort. And that just goes to show, guys, that everything that I have spoken about in this episode and previous episodes and future episodes, like, it's not bullshit. Like, there's literally researched study to back this up. And again, like, the hurdles that I've had to undergo from growing up in the Affluent Acres world and in the tough terrain world, yeah, a lot of those early years were tough, and I have seen and endured things that most people probably won't ever have to go through in their lives, right? But this is where it's just a reminder that life is a journey. You know, I'm very big on, you know, my faith in God and, you know, just that there is a spiritual element to this life and things unfolding and happening exactly how they're supposed to. And we all have our journeys in this lifetime, and we all have stories to share and tell with one another. And the more that we make it a point to do that and, you know, share our stories and just connect more as human beings, I feel like that can contribute to making the world a better place and just healing it, because Lord knows we can definitely use some more healing. So, again, guys, the topics that we covered today were primarily focused on the Affluent Acres side, the environment and culture shock that was learned, the benefits and access, the internal tug of war, and the lessons and reflections along the way. And if you've ever felt stuck between two different worlds or had to adjust to a new life while still carrying where you came from, hit me up. You know, DM me, comment, or share to your story. And again, I'm building this platform for people like us that need to share stories, whether you grew up on the Affluent Acres side or whether you grew up on the tough terrain side or whether you grew up in both worlds at the same time, like how your boy did, you know. Again, this is what this platform is for, so that's what I encourage it, and that is the mission and purpose of it. And again, guys, thank you for sticking it out with me for this episode, and hope you guys had some great insight. And if you like this episode, please be sure to follow on your favorite podcast streaming platform, whether it's Spotify, Apple Podcasts, you name it. And we're also on YouTube as well, so please be sure to like, comment, and subscribe on there as well. And be sure to hit the little notification bell so you can be the first to be notified when the latest episode drops. And again, guys, no matter what side of the fence that you grew up on, we're all more alike than we think. My name is Andre Spruell. Catch you guys next time.